Most gardeners, spend hundreds on sprays, traps, and synthetic deterrents to control pests, and still wonder why their plants keep getting eaten. But here's the mistake almost everyone makes: focusing on chemicals instead of the ecosystem right in your backyard. Healthy gardens aren't about killing pests. They're about creating a system where plants can defend themselves naturally and where beneficial insects keep the bad ones in check. When we ignore native plants, we're stripping away some of the most effective pest control strategies right under our noses. One of the biggest issues I noticed in my early garden experiments was how easy it was to misjudge soil moisture while chasing pest solutions. Overwatering or underwatering stressed plants weakened their defenses and made them far more attractive to insects. That's why I started using a 4-in-1 soil moisture meter that measures soil moisture, pH, soil temperature, and sunlight intensity. This tool lets me see exactly what's happening beneath the surface and avoid one of the biggest mistakes gardeners make: watering blindly. Once I understood how soil moisture interacts with plant health, I started testing different companion plants. That's when I discovered the native species that changed the entire dynamic in my garden. When we think about companion planting, we usually focus on popular options like marigolds or basil. These plants have some benefits, but they aren't always effective year-round. Native plants, on the other hand, evolved in the local environment alongside insects and microbes. They have natural chemical defenses that repel pests, attract predatory insects, and even improve soil health. The surprising part? Many gardeners overlook them entirely, dismissing them as weeds or boring filler plants. So, I tested several native plants alongside my vegetables, carefully monitoring pest populations and plant vigor. One species really stood out because it consistently reduced aphids, caterpillars, and beetle populations across multiple growing seasons. Unlike chemical sprays, its effect lasted all year, even during those unexpected pest surges. And, it didn't just repel pests. It actually created a mini ecosystem where beneficial insects thrived. Ignoring native plants leads to several silent problems in the garden. Plants under constant pest stress grow slower, yield less, and are more vulnerable to disease. Without native species providing natural pest control, gardeners often increase chemical inputs which can harm soil microbes, beneficial insects, and even pollinators. Over time, soil biology declines, nutrient cycling slows, and plants become increasingly fragile. In other words, ignoring native plants doesn't just allow pests, it indirectly weakens your garden's foundation. That's why tracking plant stress and soil conditions became critical in my experiments. Using the soil moisture meter, I could see when a plant was stressed from too little water, even before the leaves started wilting. I could also check pH levels and soil temperature, because stressed plants are more likely to succumb to pest attacks. This data allowed me to separate the effects of native plants from basic plant care, giving me a clear picture of what was actually working. The plant I introduced is hardy, low maintenance, and often overlooked by gardeners. Its leaves and flowers produce compounds that deter multiple types of pests while attracting ladybugs, lacewings, and parasitic wasps. I planted it in the borders of raised beds and around containers, and honestly, its effect was immediate. Aphid colonies collapsed within a week, caterpillars stayed off leafy greens, and beetle activity dropped significantly. The best part? Its effect persisted through the entire season without reapplication or special treatment. Even in hydroponic setups, I noticed that placing small pots of this native plant nearby helped reduce pests without touching the nutrient solution. It works not because of volume, but because of strategic placement and interaction with the garden ecosystem. The lesson here is simple. A native plant can be far more effective than repeated chemical treatments if you understand how to integrate it correctly. Placement matters more than quantity. I recommend planting these natives along garden edges, in pathways, and interspersed among crops. The goal is to create a continuous habitat for beneficial insects and a natural barrier for pests. Layering them with other organic materials, like mulch, also enhances their effect. Mulch helps retain soil moisture and encourages microbial activity, which strengthens plants and supports pest resistance. The 4-in-1 soil moisture meter plays a critical role here. By monitoring moisture around native plants and crops, you can ensure the soil stays in a range that keeps both plants and soil life healthy. Overwatering can wash away beneficial compounds or reduce oxygen in the root zone, while underwatering makes plants weak and more vulnerable. Keeping soil conditions optimal maximizes the native plant's pest control effect. There's a reason traditional gardening overlooked chemical sprays before modern fertilizers and pesticides existed. Native plants create balanced microecosystems. They repel pests, encourage predators, and improve soil structure simultaneously. Chemical sprays may kill a pest today, but they often harm beneficial insects, disrupt soil life, and require repeated applications. Native plants work continuously, year after year, while building long-term resilience into your garden. One key point I emphasize to serious gardeners is that native plants are about strategy, not aesthetics. Many gardeners avoid them because they think native species are weeds or unattractive. In reality, they're functional allies. Strategic placement, coupled with proper soil monitoring and plant care, produces healthier crops, bigger yields, and fewer pest problems without recurring chemical costs. In my raised beds, planting natives along the edges of tomato and pepper rows reduced aphid populations by more than 70% compared to control beds without natives. I documented this with weekly observations and consistent soil checks using the 4-in-1 meter. Moisture levels were consistent across beds, so the difference could clearly be attributed to the native plant presence, not watering differences. In backyard containers, adding small native pots reduced whitefly infestations on eggplants and cabbage by half. Even in hydroponic setups, having the native plant nearby encouraged predatory insects to patrol the area, cutting down manual pest control interventions. These results weren't isolated. They repeated over multiple seasons and locations in my garden, proving that integrating a single native plant species strategically can have significant year-round pest management benefits. The most frequent mistake I see gardeners make is planting native species haphazardly. Crowding them into one corner or leaving gaps in coverage reduces their effectiveness. Another mistake is neglecting soil health. Even the best native plants can't work miracles in poorly structured or stressed soil. Monitoring soil moisture, pH, and temperature ensures that both native plants and crops are thriving, maximizing the pest-reducing effect. Integrating native plants has a compounding effect. Over time, they increase biodiversity, improve soil structure, and reduce the need for pesticides. Healthy, pest-resistant plants produce better yields, reducing stress on the gardener. And unlike chemical interventions, native plants continue working year after year, creating a self-regulating system that requires minimal intervention once established. This is the kind of practical, experience-driven strategy serious gardeners need. Not surface-level tips or trendy products, but techniques that interact with natural systems to create sustainable, high-performing gardens. Understanding the role of native plants and integrating them strategically changes everything about pest control. When combined with proper soil monitoring, optimal watering, and thoughtful placement, these plants reduce pests, support beneficial insects, and improve overall garden health. It's a holistic approach that works in raised beds, containers, hydroponics, and backyard plots alike. If you want your garden to start solving its own pest problems naturally, Begin by incorporating native plants, strategically observing soil conditions and tracking results. Tools like the 4-in-1 soil moisture meter are invaluable for ensuring your soil stays balanced, giving native plants and crops the best chance to thrive. I'll leave the exact one I use in the description if you want to check it out. If you enjoyed this deep dive into practical pest control and native plant strategies, subscribe to Farm Logic. Share this video with other gardeners who struggle with persistent pests, because sometimes the best solutions aren't chemicals. They're the plants and systems nature intended us to work with.